Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly market overview, where we basically take a look at how the market has been going and try to look for any clues that we can search for the future price action. Quick disclaimer: anything you see in this video is not financial advice. It is merely educational purposes only. All right. So just to get started, just want to confirm you guys do see the chart, right? Was having an issue earlier.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you as well. Ibani, just please mute up afterwards. Thank you. Alrighty, so first and foremost, first thing I'm gonna look at always is the weekly here. So let's see what our weekly is showing here. All right, we're gonna start off with SPY. Okay, so first and foremost with our weekly candle, what I'm seeing is it's a neutral bearish candle. So it is bearish because we are obviously it's red. But it's more neutral because we have not created a new range. There hasn't been a new range expansion. We also haven't had any strong failures near the highs of this range. So if we had a strong rejection near the upper bounds of the previous week's range, that would lead us more of a bearish sentiment. And most surely if we start to lose like the body of the previous week's candle. On top of that, one thing that I was looking for as well is if you just pull up our fibs here, so our 50%, we're just over, we're on the near the golden zone right around here, the 61.8 61.8 area. So we didn't get a full retracement of the swing highs that we had. We didn't even really test the 50% mark yet, so we haven't completely failed the trend. So it's still on the uptrend, right? I mean, higher lows rather. It's on a higher low. It did not break out of at least the 50%. So I mean, we can create a lower high here, but I wanted to see at least like if we can uphold the top portion of the previous week's range. So it didn't even really break below that. Hence why I'm a little bit more neutral. I wouldn't go so far to say that we're bearish all the way, and then as well as bullish. I mean, we do have a higher low, so that in itself is a little bullish. We're still underneath the 200 daily moving average here. It's in purple. So as long as we're under there, that itself is just overall bearish. One thing we've always been looking for is our 5 SMA. That's going to be the yellow right here. That's our 5 daily SMA. So we always look towards it to see if there's a current trend playing out. So we'll go through that a little bit more on a smaller time frame. As far as our weekly candle, like I said, it just a little bit neutral bearish. What do I also see here? I do see there's not much of an upper body wick, so it's more of a flat, that was the high. Wasn't necessarily rejection of the previous week's high, or a rejection to continue. We just kind of stopped at wherever the high was of the week. I think it was 540 something. So we just kind of stopped towards the high of the week, but we didn't really show a strong rejection, right? But one thing we note here is we do have a little bit of a lower wick here. And this is sort of where my neutral stance truly stands. Is we have this lower wick here showing me that there is a little bit of rejection to go lower, right? So buyers are stepping in strongly. Um, if it wasn't as strong, we wouldn't. If it wasn't as strong, we wouldn't see a bigger wick here. It would probably be a tiny little wick, and then this would be the weekly's range, right? Just rejecting up here, and then just a sort of a bounce towards the bottom. But with a nice long wick like that, it's showing me that buyers are refusing to really let price fall too fast, too quickly. Um, so they are stepping in as much as possible when we get into that range here. That's around the 524, 526 area, where we see a lot of buyers stepping in. So that just gives us a little bit more clue as to what we can look for downside. Um, Not only do we need a failure of that level, but maybe a rejection there would give sellers more confidence to short. For now, like I said, it's just a strong rejection to go lower currently. Um, Another thing that I'm looking at is I guess we'll go through it a little bit more on the week on the daily because it'll make a little bit more sense. But as far as our candles here, one thing we have is we did make attempts to go over the 5 SMA in yellow here. You can kind of see it when I kind of hover over it. There we go. Where we made attempts to stay over it. Towards the end of the week, we didn't really get a rejection, but we did fail to like retest it. Once we did have a little bit of a pullback and we broke below it. But we do see a slight rejection at the 20 SMA, which is going to be important here if we want to look for any downside. I don't know how I managed to get it to stay. Yeah. So we do have a little rejection here near the 20 SMA. So our 5 is going to be our short-term current trend. And our 20 SMA is going to lead us to um, a change in trend, right? So if we start pushing over it, then we're leaning towards a bull trend, and we're going to be looking to see if that maintains or there's any continuation in it. Um, Currently, we did have a slight rejection there. Nothing too crazy to be concerned. The real thing is we want to see if our 5 starts to have some rejections as well. Um, Another thing to note on the weekly, we are inside of the previous week's range as well. So with that, um, with that, it shows that we are still compressing in the range. And this is something I was going to mention on the daily, but I guess it kind of gives you a better idea when you look at where our weekly's range is. So what you want to see on any what you want to see on any trend is you want to see a break and then an expansion of that range, right? Where we create a new high somewhere, um, or we break below and we create a new low somewhere. We want to get that range and expansion. So for now, while we're still in this range, it's more of a compression, right? So it's not inherently bullish or bearish just yet. The overall just bearish because we're underneath it and the candle itself is bearish. But as long as we're still in the previous week's range, which is quite a bit of a range, um, it's just range expansion, right? Which is I would say pretty good because it what it does is it allows us to have our levels have more significance, right? So what does that mean? Like say we have an area here, let's say this is 541 and we have over here 520, right? If price is just kind of ping-ponging in that range, then you know for sure that 541 is going to be a nice resistance and 520 is a very solid support. So the moment we break out of that range, you're going to see an explosive move up or explosive move down. Does that make sense? So now on the daily here, I think on the weekly, did I have any trends playing out? Yeah, nothing too crazy about the daily. All right, so I guess I can pull up the daily trends here. Um, you guys noticed as well, I managed to get all of my levels on a smaller time frame, so it's not like crazy. The only thing I leave here is just the pivots, um, just because they're going to be our significant volume notes in our price action. So it's always good to see no matter what time frame we're on. So our daily candle here, right here, is this little indecisive candle. Very indecisive. Um, it's actually pretty much in the body of the previous days, right? So we didn't really have um any range expansion once again. So all of this is giving me more clues as to price being compressed, right? So we're creating an area, a smaller and tighter range, building volume in a smaller and tighter range, right? So we have a pivot here at 530, and a pivot down here 524.75, I believe. So between 530 and 524.75, we have 2 days of just range compression. So it even has it back here where we're starting to compress in this range. Um, so what I'm looking for is to see one, I want to see if we start losing this 519, that's going to be a little bit more for the downside. Um, and then for the upside, of course, it's going to be our pivot here, 543. But I would really look to see if we hold over 530. So to keep it very pinpoint to what I was saying here, right? We have the 530 level and the 524 level right here. All right, we have price action compressing in this range after a large downtrend, right? So we had, I mean, a huge uptrend, right? So we were downtrend, we had this massive push up. And then last week I was mentioning that, we're in the middle of looking to see if we can have some continuation in that momentum, right? And the bullish continuation, right? So once we have this massive push up, we had, of course, a small pullback. It's expected. Once we were in that range, we were still compressing within the upper bounds of this range. I mean, it kind of looks like a flag if I look if I drew it like that, but that's not what I intended. So we just had this push out of it, off of the hype. This is really just truly what this really is. This upside here is just more of a bull trap. So we'll mention it once we get to like the IWM and QQQ, it'll make a little bit more sense. But this essentially was that bull trap because you see here where we're continuing to like have buyers strongly step up near the previous highs pretty much of the range before we had this huge range expansion. So we had price support around here 2 days in a row, with positive momentum, and then we had the news regarding the tariffs. Not the tariffs. News regarding I believe it's Powell. How Trump basically said he's not actually going to do it. And we sort of had this massive push up. Gave us the confidence just because we have buyers stepping in at two ranges. So we just kind of had this push up here. This is where I feel it's more of a trap than anything else because following a huge dead cat bounce like this, you need two things you're looking for. One is you want to see some continuation. So like a trend starting to build out before we start pushing up. So that's sort of what I meant by a continuation. So we wanted to see a bullish continuation, but as another thing that you really want to look for is on a push up, you want to see a compression and range. So you want to see price kind of consolidate in a range. Because we've been whiplashing so much, it's sort of hard to have that happen. On IWM, you'll see they have more IWM tends to have a cleaner compression of value. And what I mean by compression, I just mean that we're building up a lot of volume in a specific range, which helps us develop value in that range, right? Whether it's going to be a supply or demand. um but we need price to actually trade in an area for a significant amount of volume, right? For it to for us to have any confidence in that area. So on IWM, we kind of see that what much more often. but on SPY we're essentially doing that right now. So we're at the point here where we're compressing near the highs here, and we're compressing in this range. Um, so one thing I'm looking for, especially with this candle, like I said, it's an indecisive candle. We're still in the previous day's range. So again, we're just adding to that compression here. I think if we can have some pushes over 530 or under 524.75, I would be cautious at Monday's open, because we did have a slight gap down. Even if we push up tonight, there still might be another push down in the morning on Monday. There's no guarantee that we have this continuation at open, right, where we continue to push up, or even if we the opposite is true on a downtrend. I really want to see a stronger test of the 524 level, the 530 area, because as we're compressing here, that move, the break over the 530, is going to be a very rewarding move, and the break under the 524 is going to be very rewarding as well, especially if we start losing the 519. That's a quick push down. I wouldn't say the full lows, but we can look for like the bottom end of this range around like 509, 510s. um so that's a pretty decent risk to reward. And even for the upside, right, our next pivot is all the way at 543. So it's pretty much a $10 move on the upside and on the downside, as long as we continue to compress in this range. So as much as we all really hate chop, it does help us get that spring, whether it goes up or down, right? It'll spring towards a major volume note, right? So our major volume notes are right here: 543, 519, 503. So a break of there is going to have a nice spring to the next area where we had a lot of compression and a lot of volume. Quickly before I move to, I guess, the pathing, I think on the 30-minute, I'll go to the 30-minute for just a second. I know there's a lot of trends here. I'll try my best. Let's go ahead and just delete them for a second. Um, just want to do a quick little review of what we were looking at last week here. So last week, what I was looking for was to see if we had any sort of continuation. Um, so I was looking to have, so we had a trend line like this, and I believe I had it somewhere near these highs here. So something like this, where we were looking to see if we create a head and shoulders near this area, where we're gonna have the shoulder be this smaller area here. Look for the head being the break of this channel here. So the break here, and then looking for the next shoulder here for some downside. So we're not quite there yet. So the pathing is somewhat similar for this week. I just wanted to point out last week what we were looking at. So even this break here, we didn't get the full flush that we were anticipating, because we still had a little bit of a bounce. We had a short week. I think if we had another day, we might have been able to get a confirmation of a trend. But we didn't really get that yet, which kind of puts us in a pretty sticky situation. I'll mention that in a second here when I go to the other pathing. But one thing I just wanted to point out was this is essentially what we were looking at. So if you take a look at last week's video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, where I was looking for an uptrend to build here, some price action to go here, and look for a risk toward on the break of it. So once we had that break to short, it was a pretty nice move, right? If you wanted to look for it. My target was more towards the bottom end of this range here. So of course we didn't get that. We only had a few days left. So all we did was we had our shoulder build out here. We had our head starting to build, but we didn't really get that right shoulder completed just yet. So if you were looking at last week and you wanted to see like how it kind of played out, we didn't get the full completion that we were looking for. So let's go ahead and look at the 30-minute here again. look at the 30-minute here. And then as far as our pathing for this week, this is where I meant by us having sort of a tricky situation. Let's do, I guess, red for our head and shoulders. So the tricky situation is, all right, so we're looking for our head and our shoulders to build out, right? So this could potentially be the shoulder, or we could still make our way up here and then create the shoulder here. One thing I'm looking for is to see if we have some rejection. I have a little bit of a liquidity zone here. I'm testing out, so I'm not um like 100% sure on it yet. So it's the blue area. So I'm waiting to see if it does work out. So we still have a few days left to see. But our 5 is right there. So even if we have a break in between, essentially what I'm looking at is this blue zone to be an area where we have a rejection. So the high should be somewhere in this range. So even if we get the test of the 5 here, the high should be somewhere in this range. We look for a rejection in this range, and then that will give us our right that'll give us the our shoulder here. I'm looking more so for the test of the top of this yellow channel here, the top of this channel here, because then that would be much more of a cleaner head and shoulders, right? Where we have oh, that's too small. So cleaner head and shoulders. So in this trend here, this is the trend. So I'm looking for a cleaner head and shoulders. A rejection here would be better with our 5 SMA here. But like I said, we can just have a rejection anywhere here and then flush down for your right shoulder. Something like this. It's a really tight range. The only reason I'm a little bit more confident with this being the shoulder, even though it's a smaller range, is because we had this uptrend, strong downtrend, and then this is where the battle began, right here. um Essentially where buyers and sellers were fighting to either say, hey, we don't want price to flush right back down, like this isn't a dead cat bounce, and then you have the sellers saying like, hey, hold on, this is not going anywhere, this is a dead cat bounce. So with this small range here, I actually built out quite a bit of volume. So there's actually more volume in this range than you may think. Um, so that's why I have that as my shoulder. Let's go ahead and clear it out so it doesn't look as bad. So we have our head and shoulders here. So we're looking to see if we build out something like this. The confirmation would be the break around here, that 524 level, right? So because we can always have the look below and then break back into range. So that 524 level is gonna 524.75 level kind of gives us the confluence for that head and shoulders to play out if it does want to play out. Especially with us continuing to reject in this range. Do you see how our blue channel here continues to be that range rejection? So let's see if that still holds up with this week coming. And now I did mention a sticky situation, right? So what I mean by the sticky situation is, as we're waiting for that head and shoulders to play out, that's really going to be dependent on how we react near the 5 SMA. So currently it's at like 530 something, I believe. 531.18, if I'm not mistaken, is the level. Um, so we're really looking to see a reaction at that 5 SMA. So this is going to be kind of interesting to see what happens here, because what we could have happen is I don't know if we have a full like uptrend push through and we break back into the 50s. So get that out of your head. But what I'm looking to see is an inverse head and shoulders building out, right? Where we have a test of the 5 here, and then we still get that rejection that we were looking for, and that's essentially the trap, right? So we have that rejection near the range here, right? So we can still have the uptrend building out for the other part of the shoulder. Let's clean it up for a little bit here so you guys can see it a little easier. Let's start from the beginning. So we have our shoulder here, our head. We can have it build out, look something like this, until we break out of this trend line here. It's not really an uptrend just yet, so we want to see it break out of that. which kind of works out because if we do have a push here near this range, we could have some rejection near this area, maybe a little bit of a look below, but a quick recovery. And then our neckline, our neckline would probably be something like this, with this being our sloping trend. And then we can still have maybe a deeper head and shoulders. It doesn't necessarily, they don't always have to line up perfectly, right? It doesn't have to be a head and shoulders that is at the same area here. It could also be it could be a little deeper. It can be part of our trend here playing out. So I want to see how we react near the 5 here. We could have that bear trap, or our bull trap right here, and then lead into a bear trap to grab as much liquidity as we can to push up. That's very possible as well. But let's stick to the pattern here. So we can look for a head and shoulders to inverse head and shoulders to build out like this. But our upside here is really just going to be our 20, right? Because that's what we're looking for to see if we can change trends or we can create an uptrend. We need to recapture that 20 SMA. We need our last 20. We need to have price action above our last 20 days price action, especially with us having such a large, wide range that we keep building out. Even on our downside, on our upside, there's such a huge range that SPY is in right now, especially with the VIX highly elevated. So the only thing we can really look for to see if our 20 starts to catch up, or even a retest of it, right? So if you wanted to have further downside and we weren't looking for any patterns, you still want a retest of that 20, and you want a rejection of that 20, right? So even if we have an inverse head and shoulders that plays out like this and we have that retest, we could still have a huge flush, right? This is just part of the this is just part of the overall trend that that may be taking place, right? Where what we're doing is we're building up enough liquidity in this area, getting enough sellers involved, getting enough buyers faked out for us to have that huge flush, right? We can keep building volume in this range. And once we push down, it's going to be this hopeful area for any upside. Once, if we have any uptrends, right? So if we're down here and we're looking to see if we start become bullish, we're really going to need to be able to like take out this area before we're confident for any upside. So having that play out where we have our inverse head and shoulders play out here, reject near the 20, and then flush down, that's just going to show us that we have this whole range where sellers were in control the entire time, right? And it's going to be quite difficult for buyers to have to step in without a catalyst to get us out of this range once we break out of it, right? So let's see if that takes place this week. So that's as far as the upside. The major things that I'm looking at is always our strong pivoted points here. So 530 and 519. This is going to be if we under 519, it's going to be pretty bearish on SPY. For over 530, I'm going to look a little bit more optimistic. But your major thing here is going to be your 524.75. That's your major pivot for the week. So you want to see if we have any price action underneath it. You can look for some shorts. If it's over, I will look for some longs and just use our levels either throughout the way for our guides and try to develop any trends that you see along the way.
Smoove, I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
What kind of catalyst are you looking for? And I mean, I know it's difficult to answer that question, but just looking at macro stuff, like what kind of a catalyst are you looking at that can actually push us up there? I mean, be it inflation numbers, be it, tariffs, whatever the case might be, what do you think is important enough that can help us get there?
Help us what push over towards the 20 SMA and
Y-
like near the
Yes,
543 area.
correct.
One, definitely like news around the tariffs. Right now we just had this massive flush near the Wednesdays where we had Nvidia have that news that really brought us down quite a bit. Um, and I think I mentioned in general, so the restrictions with chips for Nvidia. They came out with that news on the 9th, and we didn't know until Wednesday, which was like 5 or 6 days later. Um, so more than that. That's almost a week later. Um, so it was several days later before we even really knew about it. So if we have a decision that comes through where they end up settling. I'm not sure the specifics on how they're going about with this tariffs and China restrictions as far as exports and imports. But if they come to a resolution, that could give us the catalyst just to at least fill the gap, right? So we had a gap down. We can at least that catalyst could give us the fill, and then we look for any news this week. There's not much news this week. The only thing we have is the beige books that are coming out this week. It's kind of just like a you could say like a overview of what the Fed is feeling. It's more of like a feelings kind of um sentiment, but it does give a lot of catalyst to the actual to the actual market, right? It affects it in the same way that actual news would come out, in the sense that like it gives us more of like a future outlook. So if the Fed seem to be more about um optimistic about our economy and our inflation easing, we actually might get a flush here. Um, and that'll be the catalyst to push us out of range. And if the opposite's true, where they're planning to have that rate cuts, and they're still looking a little bit dovish, or hawkish rather, dovish, hawkish. I always get it mixed up. Dovish. They're still looking dovish with our inflation, saying that it's still not looking too good, and then that they're thinking of doing rate cuts, we might have that push up. So it's really going to come down to the sentiment. This week we're going to have a lot of Fed speakers coming out and speaking, especially with our beige books coming out. So they're going to give us small, like political sentiment in their tones, to give us clues as to what we're going to go into or what we're looking at for the next quarter coming in, and how they're going to uh what we're looking at for like September area. So that could be the
Got it.
catalyst, and then just Trump itself, man. He could just say something really nice and the market will like it. Like
Got
Trump's in between anything else.
So again, a follow-up question to this.
Yes.
I know, like we've the market has kind of changed, with who are the key players that move the market itself. But there's also like Boeing is still, a pretty big company. What do you think? Do you think Boeing is going to influence like with the? And I don't know how many of you read it, but there are like multiple planes that have been returned from China. Like these are like a completion center in China, where they're just outfitted over there for to be delivered to the airline. Like most of the airplanes, obviously built in the United States, but the last bit of outfit is done in China. And while there's no confirmation by either the Chinese airlines or by Boeing, but there are like multiple places where it's been noted that new planes have been sent back.
areas got better things.
That they've been
It's like
impacted. Um
like
that I'm
Dallas
not
nicer areas
I
got better
couldn't say with confidence
drivers.
how it would like affect as much.
I was
Yeah,
seeing some like
Honestly, I couldn't say
somebody was like it's a thing that is like
with like
that.
a
It was just like
certainty
they need a
of
specific
it, but we do have
you
like
don't have
oil
this
news
and
coming out this week. Um I know it sounds weird for me to say that, but usually our airlines and
get my haircut
our
Tuesday.
oil, whatever news in our oil, like if let's say we found or we have an oversupply. I'm gonna go ahead and mute you. I'm sorry. So we have an oversupply of oil and we're not pulling
yeah,
too much out of our reserves. Um Oil will go up, and typically if oil goes up, then our airlines will start to go down, and if oil goes down, our airlines go up. So I don't know. I think that could help give us a clue. So like when if we do see Bowen really starting to pull down the market, and then our oil prices, we're overdrawing, and our prices start to go up on our oil, then we can look for like the downside on like the rest of the general market. If that makes sense.
it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Then that'll be your second clue to feel comfortable saying that we're looking for downside. Okay, yes. For QQQ, quickly on QQQ. Let's look at our weekly. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. So our weekly for QQQ is actually a little bit interesting. So let me scroll down on my notes here. So with QQQ, we are a little bit more, I would say, it's still neutral bearish, right? Because we're still in this range. So it's still going to be neutral as long as we're inside of this range. We haven't created a new range. So until we're out of the range, it's pretty much neutral. Price action could stay here for forever until it decides to choose a direction. And then that will be bullish or bearish. But for now, we're still overall a little bit neutral. One thing I'm looking at is that we're leaning a little bit more bearish than SPY, in the sense that we were looking at last week how we had a rejection of this range here. So let's just pretend this is a big supply zone where sellers are stepping in heavily. So on our uptrend on the previous week, we had a rejection in this range. And then this week, once again, we had further rejections in this range, as well as R20 actually rejected on QQQ. So we did have a rejection on the daily. We'll look at that in a second. So we did have a rejection in that area, which is what we're looking for to see if we can change from a downtrend to an uptrend. We want to see price action over the 20. So with us having that multiple rejections of that range, and then we also are unable to hold the 5 SMA, which is right here. It's kind of hard to see, but it's right here. So we're still underneath it, right? It's actually at 540, 551. So we're quite a ways underneath it. And we rejected at we rejected at our 20 SMA. We could not have any price action that held over it. And then, like I said, we have this rejection in this range here, our upper bounds of this range. If you want to just keep it simple, I mean, you could just look at the wick of this week's candle, and that'll be your range, essentially, where sellers are stepping up heavily, right? And even kind of confluences with this range here, where we had an attempt to go over, and we had the rejection of the 20 to continue to push us down and make sure that this range is respected. So this is why I'm feeling a little bit more bearish on QQQ than I am on SPY. SPY is like QQQ is like underperforming quite a bit as opposed to SPY. I mean, the only thing that is, I would say, similar is that we're again still over the 50%. So we're around the 61 on the fib from our upside, just looking at this week's candle. Our 50% is somewhere around here. So we're still like over, we haven't even retraced the full range of the previous weeks. So we're not underneath the 50% yet. And as long as we're over it, it could still just be some sort of bull flag, right? But it is also part of a larger, let's say, a larger bear flag as well. So we're kind of like in an iffy spot as far as like looking at an overall trend, especially if we're still underneath the 200 here. But yeah, so the only thing that I will say as far as the weekly candle is concerned is that we're continuing to reject in this range, strong rejections in this area, where sellers have proved 1, 2, 3 times, right? And you can even look at it around here, but I would rather just focus on this 3 here. So we have 3 weeks where sellers are basically saying, like, you're not going above here. Like, I won't let you go far up, it's as much as you want it to go up, I'm not going to let it happen. And now we need to see sellers get exhausted, right? Or buyers get exhausted, right? If buyers start to get exhausted, then we can look for that push under. My pivot is going to be the 540 area. We'll go through that on the daily in a second here. But under 540 is really where you're going to see buyers start to get exhausted. So right now, all we can see on the weekly is just this area where we're having a constant supply in this area where sellers holding control of this range, and they're not allowing price to push up any higher just yet. All right, and then our daily here. Our daily candle is, it's a slight hammer candle. It's a bearish hammer candle. It's nothing too significant with it. The only thing is, like I said, similar to SPY, we're inside of the previous day's range, so it's still a range compression, right? So we're still compressing in this range for that spring, whichever direction it decides to choose. If we have any sort of positive momentum or negative momentum that pushes us up or down. So it's just as indecisive as SPY, but it's not as clear inside of the candle as SPY has a an upper wick and a lower wick. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily look the same, but the sentiment's the same. And this is what I was looking at, right? So we had our multiple rejections, right? This is a little further back, but on our push up, we actually rejected near the 20 SMA. And then once we had that push down, right, to retest our 5, this is something I mentioned. I think I've mentioned a few times. I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but I always mention that if we're on looking for an uptrend, right, we want to start seeing the 5 SMA curl up, right? Especially after a downtrend. What a micro trend that we can look for after like strong downtrend is to look to see if we start to have price action that curls over the 5 SMA, retest, and then fail. So that's really essentially our bounce after strong downtrends. So what we have here is just that, right? So we have that push over our 5, continuous momentum over it. We had our retest of it and holding that trend, the uptrend. The next thing we want to look for to see if we have another rejection at the 20. Once again, we did get that second rejection at the 20. Then this is I believe Tuesday, where we had that really slow day where we're kind of compressing once again inside of we're compressing between our SMAs here. And then we had our gap down on Wednesday, right, where we started to push underneath it. Our uptrend led to actually a rejection near the 5 SMA. So I think that was midpoint of the day where we had the strong push up, and we actually rejected near the 5 daily moving average. And then the following day we didn't even get another test of it, and because we kind of compressed in this range for so long, we didn't get our daily simple moving average to have any kind of curl, right? Did it curl down? We do have the 20 starting to curl, right? Because we just have rejections on a downtrend constantly. But our compression in this range here, where we're just kind of chopping here, didn't even lead us to a test of there, but also our 5 is pretty flat, meaning there's that neutral sentiment where we have we're having a rejection, so it's strong, it's a little bit more bearish, right? We're rejecting the 5-day trend, but we are also um the SMA is fairly flat, and we're inside of the previous day's range, right, giving us clues for that further compression. So that's the only thing I really see off of the 5, off of the daily, is that we do have that compression starting to build out, and we want to start seeing that 5 curl for some more downside. So we want to start seeing that take place. So let's look at that for this week coming up. And like I said, we just have that continued rejection at the 20. So this is just giving me more of a clue that we're severely underperforming, especially in the tech sector. SPY's it's been like holding up. It's kind of like tottering with the financial sector, because the tech sector hasn't been able to hold up as much as it did in the past. So our financial sector has kind of been carrying just a little bit. So if we start to see that start to fail, then we'll have more confidence with our tech and our financial sector starting to fail. But let's go ahead and take a look at let's see if I have any trends here. Yep. So this is one thing I'm looking at. This is just a trend here. I think on the weekly, it makes more sense. Yes. So on the weekly, what I'm looking at is we're on a pretty strong downtrend. If I pull up I think this is the Fibonacci. Nope, that is not. I don't know why I do that every time. So if I pull up a fib here from our weekly down from our downtrend, right? So we had to push all the way down, and is this the weekly? Yeah, this is the weekly. I meant to go on the daily. Sorry about that. Pull a fib from the high to our bottom of the range. Like I said, we have not broken underneath the 50% of the previous, that huge long green candle that came up. So we're still not breaking below the 50, but we are really, really close to that 50%. And then overall, we're on a pretty strong downtrend. Even if you look from here down, so I looked from the top here to the downside all the way down here. This could just very well be just part of our larger flag trying to build out, where we just had this catalyst that kind of pushed us out of range, and we're starting to compress in this range here. So one thing I'm looking at, especially for our downside, any downside, I want to see us on the daily start to have a closure underneath here. And then we could start looking at the smaller time frames for any other pathing that can take place. But for me, what I'm really looking at here, I'll hold it here for a second for you guys to take a look at it. But I'm just really looking to see if we get one candle underneath here or one candle over here. That's where I'm gonna be a little bit more aggressively short or bullish if we start having a break out of this channel here. So just to make sure that we're not in just another bear flag, or are we in or are we in a bull flag, right? Trying to compress it. It's more of a bull flag consolidation, because it's more of a wedge here that's taking place. Wedge here. So we're looking to see whether I have like a push out of this range here. So that's why I'm really looking at just this for me to be more comfortable for like a short or a long. I'll go on the smaller time frame here on the hourly, and it'll sort of make sense or why I have so this is this blue channel here, similar to SPY. So we have the blue channel here, similar to SPY. We had that compression in this range, but we also have rejections. If we just brought this channel down here. So it's more of like an area where we're grabbing liquidity for the downside, or where bears are just essentially trapping the bulls and then pushing price down, grabbing it, pushing it down, grabbing it, pushing it down. And this area is where we had that massive push out of range, and we just kind of compressed here. So it's not really a strong indicator that this was invalidated. It was more of just compression in this range. I mean, even when we got into this range, it rejected, right, several times before we had that not news catalyst, our push up out of it here. We're just kind of recovered out of a strong downtrend over here. So one thing I'm just looking for is to see if we have a rejection in this range here. So this as far as pathing goes, the similar thing with SPY, I'm looking for that head and shoulders to start building out, but I want to see liquidity build in this range here. So we could have that little bit of a trap similar to SPY with our 5 here. So we can have that trap where we start to push above here, and then our 20 will start to catch up. So if we do have here, this is where we have the what's it called, this is what I mean by the trap here building out, where it starts to look like a head and shoulder, inverse head and shoulders for the upside here. And then once we start seeing us slightly over the the 5 here, our 20 would start to catch up around here. And then once again, we're still going to be in this range here where it's a liquidity grab for any downside. So it's going to be really pivotal once it's going to be really important to see what happens in that reaction of the 5 SMA. So I'm not 100% going to like rush into like a pathing. Like I said, same thing with SPY. I'm just really looking to see how we react to this 5 next. Like this is our next step, right? We were looking to see if we can reclaim the 5, support over it, and then maintain price action over it, or a small uptrend. So now we want to see us reject the 5 for us having a continued downside. So as far as pathing on the downside, the same thing goes, right? But I'm looking more to see if we have that fake out. This is what I mean by the fake out, where we have the 20 catch up here, and it'll start to create that. It'll be the head for the inverse head and shoulders here, where this is the left shoulder, and then our right shoulder would be somewhere around here, and then the head's going to be the rejection of the 20 once again if we do have any positive momentum that pushes us up there. I'm going to quickly go through IWM because I know we're running low on time. I'm going to quickly go through IWM, and you'll see where I mean, where we have kind of we have room to have a little bit of a bounce. And if SPY gets that bounce with the small caps, it might give us that push towards our 5 or 20 to look for a rejection. So this is one thing I'm gonna be looking for, to just really see if this break over the 5 is going to be either a trap, or we have that head and shoulders trap here, or do we really reclaim the 20 and start to push up and look for some stronger uptrends. But I would look to see 464 for any confidence on the upside. A major thing here is going to be the 440 level on QQQ. Right now we're just kind of hovering over it. Once we lose that, that's going to be that range expansion where we have the breakout compression in this range here. So we want to see price action over the 540. Let's do 555 just to be a whole number, and the 541 area here. So these are going to be your clues here, right, for where this compression leads us. So if we do have a break out of this, is going to be a nice move up, and a move down here is going to be a break underneath. This is going to be a nice move down, with our highs and lows right around this area, giving us a nice about a $10 move, similar to SPY on the downside and the upside. This is our expected highs and lows. So curious to see what happens here. We're still compressing in this range. Any price action in here, I know it's a really big range, like a $10 range, between 450 and 440 here. I know it's a $10 range here, but we can easily continue to chop in this range until we get that push out of it. And this is where we're going to keep getting that whiplash, where every news will throw us left, throw us right, throw us left constantly. So I would just be on the lookout for that, especially with our pivots here. That's going to be your clue, really, is going to be the push over those areas. I will give those levels at the end of the live as usual. Quickly go over IWM here. Let's see. All right, on the weekly here for IWM. Last week I was mentioning that we were having where this candle gave me more clues of a dead cat bounce, where it was a stronger upper body wick rejection in this range, the upper bounds of this range here. So this is essentially what the dead cat bounce looks like. And then this is where we're looking at last week, where I said that we were kind of in the middle of that decision whether it's a dead cat bounce or not. IWM is giving us what it really should look like off of a dead cat bounce, right? So we have a push down, a nice massive push up that brings us back in this range for a rejection, and then we compress in this range for further downside, or when bulls decide to step up, right? But we would have to take out the previous high. So over 192 would be where you look for that explosive move up. And then on the downside here is going to be the 184 area. So a break underneath here is going to give you the massive push down. I don't even have to really look at the like all of our levels should just kind of give you that, but that's essentially what a dead cat bounce, how to look at it when you're looking for a dead cat bounce. You're looking for a strong downtrend, a massive push up, long body wick, a compression inside of the range of the rejection area, and then your break is just going to be underneath the body of this candle and over the wick of the previous candle. That's going to give you the massive move. Anything in between is just going to continue to compress or push up or push down. Now, if I look at the daily here, is it the daily? Not really the daily, I guess, but we do have a major pivot here at 185.58 on IWM. It's kind of the center point of our range here. I'll go to the 1 hour so you guys can kind of see it. So as far as our pathing, we were looking at IWM. We didn't really get anything yet. We're still in the between. Last week we were looking at to see if we have a break out of this channel here, or just basically a bear flag like how we have on the daily. Is it the weekly? Our weekly here, where we're looking at a downtrend here just to see if we have our bear flag building out. That's our blue channel, the same one on the hourly. So we're just looking to see, we have some room for an upside, right? I just pulled the fib here, but we have room to the upside to test the 20 once again. So we do have a little bit of we have room to expand on the upside for IWM, right? It's curling underneath the weekly's range. So we can still have some price action here that starts to reject. And then once we get that break, that's where you're going to see the massive push downwards. If we do get that, so anything in between this range is just going to be your bear flag consolidation. So now we're looking at the our 1 hour. Last week we were looking at after the push up, we were looking to see how an uptrend is going to hold. We're looking we weren't necessarily looking for any pattern. We just wanted to see if we have a break in our trend line. So we did have a small break in our trend line. Nothing too crazy worth mentioning. But as far as our range compression, this is what I meant by how IWM has a little bit more clues when it comes to a range expansion or a range compression rather, right? Where we have, this is our range here, push, consolidate in this range. And then once we break out of it or we break over it, it's a positive momentum. I know this is a gap up, so it's not necessarily easy to see there, but at least for the downside, you can kind of see it where we're consolidating in this range. And then we have that push down. Once again, we consolidate a little bit in this range. Once we have a push up, we push out of that range. So we do have over here, this is more of like, it's currently just like a supply area, right? Where we have a rejections here, weakness here, weak rejections once at the top of the range here, and then continued struggles here. But this is what I'm looking at as far as our range and to see if we have that compression, right? And that's why I say that as long as we're on this up, it's still holding the trend line. It's still part of the bear flag, and we can continue to have this compression in this range. For either we look for that upside or the recapture of the 20 here, or we look for that break underneath the 185, which is the center point of our pivot that we were looking at on the daily. So if we have continue to compress in this range, even if we're heading up, we're still compressing in this range to look for that push down towards the bottom end of our range, that 179 level. So losing that 185 is going to give us that push to the 179. But what I want to see is to continue this uptrend here and just continue to compress in this range here. So when we do finally get that break of 185, we have that strong push right towards 179. But if we don't, if we start to just break in between, this is just where it starts to give us that chop, where it's still being indecisive, where we have an overhead supply, and then you can just consider this more of a demand. So anything in between is just going to be knocking us about, and I wouldn't really suggest trading in between here. So even if we have a look below, right, we can easily just push back into this range. So you're looking to short under 185, and then you get trapped when it just decides to push up. So that's why I want to see if we continue to hold, an uptrend, and then we have the same thing, um, where we have that compression in this range here, and then we can push to the upside or look for a flush down towards the bottom end of the range. I would say anything in between 185 and this 181 level on IWM is a no touch zone, right? So I would not suggest trading in this range, as once we have a push out of it, it just kind of pushes into it. A failure under it just kind of pushes there, and you're just getting whiplash the whole way through. So I do want to see us continue this uptrend here and continue that compression. And with it having that uptrend, it might give us what we need on SPY to have that retest of the 5, or a recapture of the 5 and retest the 20 SMA, what we were looking at. So let's see if that plays out this week. This is what I meant, where we have IWM having a little bit more room to push to the upside. So we look to see if we can have that give us that push that SPY needs towards the upside, and then we'll get that rejection of the 20, which is what we need, similar to what happened on QQQ. Right. It's what we need, similar to what happened on QQQ, where we needed that rejection at this area. So this week is going to be important, especially with excellent compression. I feel like any good catalyst that comes out of this week, I'm not sure what the catalyst will be, but any good push that gives us momentum out of this range that we're compressing in, it's going to give us a nice risk to reward setup. So I am going to be on the lookout for that. Same thing with QQ. Like I said, this is your range here. So a break out of this is going to be very rewarding. A break down out of this is going to be very rewarding. So I would look for that this week, pretty much. Any other questions? I'll probably post a little bit more on the some of the sectors. The only thing I'm really looking at right now is the financial sector. Last week we were looking for a squeeze. We wanted to see if it retested the 47 area, which is pretty much the neckline of our previous head and shoulders, right here. So we're looking to see if that we can recapture that, and then that kind of corresponded with the 200 to see if we have any upside, and it did give us that little push earlier in the week that we were looking for. But if we continue to fail here, especially if we lose that 45 46 level, this will be that catalyst for us to have that strong push down, where we'll have tech failing and our financial sector failing. That'll probably be what we need for any pushes on the downside. So I'll be taking a look to see if XLF starts to lose the 46 level here. I think that's it. Nothing else, and nobody else has any questions. I could take a look at Nvidia and Tesla for you guys, and Apple if you guys want. Like I say, it's always gonna be best to take a look really at what Moen posts as far as the daily. Can we look at Nvidia? Okay, Nvidia for calls. Okay, so yeah, I would look for Moen for any of the levels on during the day. But as far as what I'm looking at for like an overall weekly structure right now, what we have is, let's look at the weekly for a second here. So we've been on this continuous downtrend where we've been rejecting the 20 all the way through. Once we had that push up, what was it, last week, right? We had that push up. It continued to show us that rejection where we had a break over the 20 and we're continuing to fail at the 20. Go to the daily here where we have continuous failures at the 20 SMA. And especially another rejection here near the 200 earlier, and towards the end of March here, which is what we were looking for, like as far as the rest of the market. But focusing here on the day, on the hourly here. Oh, this is Tesla. I'm sorry. Well, I guess it kind of works. I'll just finish out my thoughts on Tesla here. Um, For Tesla, what I'm really looking for, like I said, we're continuing to reject at that 20 here. So what I'm really looking for to see if we can recapture the 20. We're still in this bear flag, right? We're starting to break out of it. We can probably create another channel here outside of this range here. Give us more of a compression where we can see price starting to chop around to break out of it. For Tesla, what I'm really going to be looking for is this 548 248, sorry, 248 area. This is going to be really key this week. If we recapture this, I would look for upside towards a retest of that 20 one more time. So anything once you break over to 248, that's going to be really good for the upside. For the downside, I would look to see a break underneath this 230. Did I have 233? 233. This level 233.84. A break under there would be looking more for the downside. That's going to be a retest of these previous this previous range here, because we had the push up. We're already down 50% of that positive momentum, so 50% is right here at 241. We're already underneath that, so once we lose these highs here, can look for much more downside. So a break under 233.84, a break over 248 for the upside. Again, this is weekly levels. So I would say, like I said, look for Moen's levels every day. But for the weekly, a break over 248 is going to be very rewarding, and a break under 233 is going to be very rewarding. And that's for more of a weekly structure rather than a daily structure. All right, let's take a look at NVIDIA quickly. So on NVIDIA, one thing I was looking at is, once again, we're struggling to hold over the 20 here. So we did have the retest. We did push over it, which was good. Right, so we had to push over it. Again, that retest of the 5. And unlike most of the other sectors, right, where we had SPY and QQQ starting to, reject near the 20, we actually had a retest of it, a hold over it 2 days in a row, where we're maintaining price action over it, which is what's going to give us that catalyst for us, like upside. Well, not catalyst rather, but more of a confidence in the upside. With our news, it broke us right back down underneath the 20. So it's more of a, I would say it looks like a failure, but because it's news driven, it's not necessarily a failure at the 20. So we do still have some like room to retest the 20 for some downside, or we also can recapture it for some upside. So what I'm going to be looking for NVIDIA is going to be over 108.75 here. I have 77 here, 108.75. So it's going to be pretty much where our 20 SMA is. So 108.75. Should just do it right there. 108.75 for any upside. So break over that's going to give us a nice risk to reward, where we're over the 20. Once again, we're starting to support it. And then we can look to test around this 113, 115 area. Once again, I'll push over that area. I know that's a little bit of ways away, but that's where I'm going to look for more confidence, to feel confident to say that we're going up. Anything in between is just, indecisive, right? We can just fill the gap here. We can just push up, fill that gap that we created here, and then just continue flushing down. So it would be better if we can break over, even if we have a light rejection here, and then recapture the 20, then we can look for some upside here. So I want to see what happens. I want to see us recapture the 20 once again. After we captured it, held it. Once we had that news, it pushed us down underneath it. So I want to see us retest it again and see if we can hold over it, because that's what we really want to see, to make sure that the longer term trend, or at least medium to longer term, is starting to lean more bullish. As long as we're underneath it, then the medium to long term is bearish. And then we just look to our 5 here for any current trends that are building out. And then I guess, did I say the downside? Our downside here, what I'm really looking at is just going to be underneath the 90, 100. Let's do psychologically 100. I think on the 5 minute it makes more sense why I did what I did, the levels. Yep. All right. So for the 99 level, I get 99.75. So it's something somewhere around here, I guess I put it. I have it written down, but I don't have it plotted for some reason. So right around here. So this is pretty much our previous swing highs, the similar to Tesla, right? Where we're looking to see what happens, right? So we had this push down, the massive run up with the Trump news, right? And we just kind of tried to maintain price action over. We had the catalyst that kind of filled us down to the down the catalyst that pushed us out of that uptrend. So what I'm looking for, like I said, is just we have this same similar thing where we're having a range compression at the upper bounds here, with 108 being like the center point here where we had a retest here, push over it. So one thing I want to look at is to see if we have enough price action here that if we do have that recapture of the 20 over the 108.75, we can look for some upside towards here. And then as far as the downside, I want to see us break below these swing lows here, um, before we had that push up, right? So we had whatever gap up news happened here. That's fine. We basically just rejected on the 5 all the way down. And then we had the massive push up. So now a failure here at the 99.75 area would bring us back into this range. But by the time, once we get there, buyers would pretty much be exhausted. We're at the lower bounds of the range and we've pretty much given back everything that we made here. So a break here back into this range is going to give us a nice failure towards this 94 level. So I would say 99.75 to 94, 108.75 to 113, 114 area. Really want to see us retest the 20. Hopefully that helped a little bit. I could always break it down throughout the week as well. Just message me in the options chat. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording now.